It began with a blade of grass. Or, to be precise, 14,673 blades of grass, each standing a few inches too tall according to the meticulously enforced HOA regulations of Willow Creek Estates. George Whitman, 67, widower and former professor of botany, didn't see the harm. Grass grew. That was nature. But in Willow Creek, nature came second to the rulebook. George had lived peacefully in his lakeside cottage for 6 years. He mowed when he remembered, pruned when he felt like it, and generally believed that as long as he wasn't throwing wild parties or parking on the lawn, he was being a good neighbor. Unfortunately for him, Margaret Finch didn't share that view. Margaret was the HOA president, commander of committees, and a self-proclaimed guardian of suburban order. To her, George's shaggy lawn was an eyesore, a threat to property values, decorum, and the spirit of Willow Creek. She warned him 3 times. Each notice more passive-aggressive than the last. The final one was delivered with flair, laminated, sealed in a red envelope, and hand-delivered at 6:00 a.m. George chuckled as he read it over a cup of chamomile tea. Final notice. You are in violation of Willow Creek Code 7.1.b. Lawn height exceeding 2.5 inches. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in fines and possible legal action. He crumpled the letter, fed it to his compost bin, and whispered, "Let nature be." 72 hours later, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled up to George's house. Out stepped Margaret Finch in heels that stabbed the earth like she meant it harm, accompanied by 2 local police officers. Young, unsure of why they were here, but too polite to argue with someone wearing a blazer with shoulder pads. Margaret jabbed a finger at George's lawn like it had insulted her mother. "This is it," she barked. "This is the kind of chaos that ruins neighborhoods. You'll be jailed." George emerged from his porch, holding a newspaper and a slice of toast. Because of grass? Yes, Margaret hissed. Because of grass. The officers exchanged glances. One of them coughed to stifle a laugh. "This is ridiculous," George said calmly. "You can't arrest me for not mowing my lawn." Margaret snapped her fingers, and one of the officers awkwardly stepped forward. Mr. Whitman, we're here to inform you that you're being issued a citation for noncompliance. Not under arrest yet." "I see," George replied, chewing his toast. "Well, I'll see you in court." Margaret's eyes glinted with victory. "You'll regret this." The courtroom was small, and the judge was sleepy. But George came prepared. He arrived with a briefcase full of botany texts, photographs of thriving pollinator species in his lawn, and letters from environmental groups praising his natural yard. Margaret, meanwhile, brought a binder labeled Lawn Violations. 2017, present, color-coded and cross-referenced. The trial drew a crowd. Willow Creek residents were bored, and watching their neighbors go to court over grass was the most excitement they'd had since the 4th of July fireworks misfired in 2019. George stood up and made his case. "Your Honor, I contend that my lawn is not a violation, but a contribution to the environment, to biodiversity, and to the spirit of independence. My wildflowers attract bees, my grass provides shelter for small animals, and I refuse to kill it all for the sake of uniformity." Margaret stood next, voice trembling with righteous fury. "He's undermining everything we've built. If we allow one man to let his lawn run wild, others will follow. Next thing you know, we'll have chickens, goats, and God forbid, garden gnomes." A gasp echoed in the courtroom. The judge, a tired man named Harold with thinning hair and a love for gardening himself, took a long pause. Then he said, "Mr. Whitman, I find you not guilty." News spread fast. Local media picked up the story. Retired professor defeats HOA in lawn case. George became an unexpected hero, a folk legend of suburban rebellion. People began letting their lawns grow a little longer. Some even planted wildflowers. Margaret was livid. She tried to double down, proposing stricter regulations, organizing town hall meetings, and writing letters to the mayor. But the tide had turned. Young families saw George's yard as charming and eco-friendly. Kids loved the butterflies. Retirees saw in him a bit of their younger, freer selves. A movement had begun, and it was rooted, literally, in the earth. George was invited to speak at local events. The lawn less mowed became a TED Talk. Environmental groups reached out, asking for his advice. Margaret, meanwhile, was voted out in the next HOA election. Her replacement? A quiet librarian named Sarah, who had recently turned her backyard into a butterfly sanctuary a year later. George's lawn was a recognized native plant habitat. A small sign near his mailbox read, "Certified Pollinator Garden. No mowing required." Margaret had moved to a stricter neighborhood across town one sunny afternoon as George tended to a patch of goldenrod. A boy from the neighborhood stopped by. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "my science class is doing a project on ecosystems. Can I interview you about your lawn?" George smiled and knelt down beside him. "Of course, kid. But first, tell me, do you know what a milkweed is?" And as he explained the wonders of wild plants, butterflies danced around them, bees buzzed peacefully, and the lake shimmered in the background. Sometimes, the grass is greener where you let it grow. Margaret Finch was not a woman who accepted defeat lightly. After losing her HOA presidency, she disappeared from Willow Creek. Neighbors whispered she had joined a stricter community across town, one where lawns were cut by laser-guided robotic mowers, hedges were trimmed weekly by uniformed landscapers, and garden gnomes were